people need to contact their MP and their provincial MLA MPP and say, you don't want gender identity, gender expression in the Human Rights Code because it leads to naked men in girls' bathrooms and change rooms.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and unfortunately for the world, I've got another update on another lawsuit being brought on by the infamous Jessica Simpson, formerly Jonathan Yaniv. Yes, that is the same violent, predatory trans activist who's assaulted our reporters, threatened my children, and who is suing Rebel News in the BC Human Rights Tribunal, which you can find out more on how to help us with at StopYaniv.com. Yaniv is also trying to strong-arm a beauty pageant in Ontario Human Rights Tribunal because they had a safety rule in place for female contestants to not have to compete against individuals with male genitalia, and also be in intimate corridors getting ready as well. And instead of Simpson confirming whether or not Simpson still has male genitalia, Simpson hit them with a $10,000 lawsuit in the tribunal under the claim that Simpson had experienced an injury to dignity and feelings. It's yet another example of the growing need for women and children to have our own protected spaces, because the businesses who try and honor that can face this type of consequences. And to hear more about what this pageant is facing, I recently caught up with John Carpe at a women's rights event. How fitting. And Carpe is the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and they have agreed to take on this case for the pageant at no cost to them through crowdfunding. And now Carpe will give you the history of when the JCCF first had to take on Yaniv and the latest on this upcoming beauty pageant case.
Well, it was around 2019, there were women, many of them immigrants to Canada, and they were doing a Brazilian bikini wax business from home. Sometimes there were children present in the home. And so there's a person with male genitalia identifying as a woman would phone up and say, I want a Brazilian bikini wax. And the woman would say, well, no, we're not doing that. I want only women. And this individual filed human rights complaints, which is already hard for anybody, but especially if you're new to Canada and you get this letter in the mail from the Human Rights Commission or tribunal and saying, there's legal proceedings against you. This person, the complainant, extracted money, settlement money from some people. We don't know how much or how many people. So the Justice Center provided lawyers to defend these women against the human rights prosecution. We were successful at the end of the day. One very discouraging aspect was that one of the women that we defended said that she had been to 17 different law firms, each of whom said, we will not represent you. And she was willing to pay money. She wasn't asking for pro bono help. But they said, we don't want to be publicly seen as transphobic or facing public accusations of being hateful and discriminatory. Therefore, we're not going to provide you with legal assistance. So the Justice Center provided legal counsel, and ultimately these human rights complaints against these women were dismissed, which was good. Although it's still sad, it was horribly stressful. Even if you get free legal representation, it's still a horribly stressful thing to go through.
Mm-hmm. And it's never ending. If you go to our special website called repealsection7.com, you can find out more stories about Jessica Simpson, whom is better known as Jonathan Yaniv, aka Wax My Male Genitalia. Now, let's talk about some of the provisions that make this type of thing okay in different systems and institutions. For example, we have C16 federally, and in my province in British Columbia, we have Section 7, which under hate speech, it protects individuals under gender identity. How has that changed the legal system when it comes to standing up for women?
Well, it's a lot harder. Even, for example, the criminal code, gender identity, gender expression, if you don't choose your words carefully, you could be criminally prosecuted for willfully promoting hatred against transgender people. I'm not aware of anybody that's faced criminal charges, but there's this terrible chilling effect. And certainly on the human rights level, I got a phone call a few months ago from a businessman where male employee wants to start using the women's bathroom. And I said, well, the current laws with gender identity, gender expression being a protected ground on par with race and religion and so on, quite possibly that employer is in a weak legal position, and it's the male employee who has the right to use the women's washroom. Now, they've resolved it without a human rights complaint going ahead, but still, people need to contact their MP and their provincial MLA, MPP and say, you don't want gender identity, gender expression in the Human Rights Code because it leads to naked men in girls' bathrooms and change rooms, where, I have 3 daughters. I don't want them to ever have to fear that if they're going to a change room, that there's going to be a naked man there. Yeah. And yet under current provincial legislation in Alberta, and I think it's the same in every province, if there was a naked man in the change room, the law would protect the naked man and not protect my daughters. So we have to advocate and let her speak to the politicians and say we need the law changed.
Yeah. And not only does it protect the man in the change room, as we've reported on for the example in Nanaimo, even if the parent catches this man peeping underneath the stall at her child, she is told it's his human right to be in there. Now, I want to finish on a case that's coming up that you are helping to represent. And for those of you who don't know, the JCCF runs by donations from people like you who care about these types of issues. And it does involve, and we're giving it more airtime because it proves a point. It involves, again, Jonathan Unive, now called Jessica Simpson. Give everybody an update on that.
So several years ago, a complaint filed against Galaxy Beauty Pageant in Ontario, I believe Toronto. And they had a policy that a transgender person after surgery could go into the beauty pageant as a woman. But if you still have male genitalia, then no, you're not allowed to participate. That was their policy. And that's to protect the girls because the same thing, like no grandfather, father, uncle, there's no males allowed in the change room because they have women and girls there. So human rights complaint, and we are providing lawyers to defend Galaxy Beauty Pageant against this complaint. And it's important to fight the battle. We'll see what happens but we shouldn't have to fight these battles. The legislation can be changed, and that gets rid of the problem right then and there.
And what's at risk with that human rights complaint should, God forbid, it goes through?
It takes away from the people who cherish this beauty pageant, who want to be involved in it. I'm assuming the people that are running it, organizing it, participating in it, they're doing that because they like that and they enjoy that. And this runs a risk of shutting down beauty pageants where people are going to say, well, we can't really do that anymore because they're legally a man is entitled to be in a woman's change room simply by claiming to identify as a woman. So that's a sad result. You're taking away something from people that they like and love and enjoy and want to do. And that's sad because that's one of the things about our free society, right? Different people can do what they enjoy and what they like. But here's like, okay, that's going to get shut down. But it can be fixed by people contacting their politicians and saying gender identity, gender expression should not be part of human rights legislation. And if that's gone, then the problem is solved.
Whether it's a woman's beauty pageant, female business owners, or our journalists at Rebel News, this serial litigant, Unive, keeps weaponizing the system to try and silence anyone who stands in the way. Simpson is dragging us through the BC Human Rights Tribunal to try and censor reports just like this and set a precedent for others to do the same by labeling our fact-based reports about Simpson as hate speech. We've already hired top legal counsel to defend our journalism and have already been hit with thousands of dollars in legal expenses to do so. So if you value our independent reporting and want to help us stop this menace, please donate what you can at stopuniv.com.